Welcome to Easy English Hub. Today, we're diving into 50 common phrases to ask for help in English. Whether you're in a new city, at work, or just need a hand, these phrases will make it easy to ask for assistance. Let's get started. Can you help me? This is a simple, polite way to ask for assistance. Use it in almost any situation, like when you're lost or need help with a task. Example: at a store, you might say, "Can you help me find the cereal aisle?" Another example: at work, you could ask, "Can you help me with this report?" Could you give me a hand? This phrase is a casual way to ask for help, often used with friends or colleagues. Example: when moving furniture, you might say, "Could you give me a hand with this table?" Another example: at school, you could ask, "Could you give me a hand with these books?" I need some help. This is a direct way to express that you require assistance. It's versatile and can be used formally or informally. Example: at a tech store, you might say, "I need some help choosing a laptop." Another example: at home, you could say, "I need some help with this recipe." Can you assist me? This is a formal and polite way to ask for help, often used in professional settings. Example: at a hotel, you might say, "Can you assist me with my luggage?" Another example: in an office, you could ask, "Can you assist me with this software?" Could you do me a favor? This phrase is used to politely request help, often for something small or personal. Example: you might say to a friend, "Could you do me a favor and pick up some coffee?" Another example: at work, you could ask, "Could you do me a favor and proofread this?" Can you show me how? This phrase is used when you need someone to demonstrate or explain a process. Example: at a gym, you might say, "Can you show me how to use this machine?" Another example: in a classroom, you could ask, "Can you show me how to solve this equation?" I'm stuck. Can you help? This is a casual way to admit you're struggling and need assistance. Example: while doing homework, you might say, "I'm stuck. Can you help with this math problem?" Another example: at work, you could say, "I'm stuck. Can you help with this spreadsheet?" Would you mind helping me? This is a very polite way to ask for help, showing respect for the other person's time. Example: at a library, you might say, "Would you mind helping me find this book?" Another example: at home, you could ask, "Would you mind helping me with this recipe?" Can you lend me a hand? This is another casual way to ask for help, similar to "give me a hand." Example: while gardening, you might say, "Can you lend me a hand with these plants?" Another example: at a party, you could ask, "Can you lend me a hand with these decorations?" I could use some assistance. This is a polite and slightly formal way to ask for help. Example: at a bank, you might say, "I could use some assistance with this form." Another example: in a meeting, you could say, "I could use some assistance with this presentation." Can you explain this to me? This phrase is used when you need clarification or help understanding something. Example: in a class, you might say, "Can you explain this concept to me?" Another example: at a store, you could ask, "Can you explain this warranty to me?" I'm not sure what to do. This phrase expresses confusion and asks for guidance indirectly. Example: at a new job, you might say, "I'm not sure what to do with these files." Another example: while cooking, you could say, "I'm not sure what to do with this ingredient." Can you point me in the right direction? This is a polite way to ask for guidance, often used when lost or unsure. Example: in a city, you might say, "Can you point me in the right direction to the museum?" Another example: at work, you could ask, "Can you point me in the right direction for this project?" I'm having trouble with this. This phrase indicates difficulty and asks for help indirectly. Example: at school, you might say, "I'm having trouble with this assignment." Another example: at home, you could say, "I'm having trouble with this appliance. Can you walk me through it?" This phrase asks for a step-by-step explanation or demonstration. Example: at work, you might say, "Can you walk me through this process?" Another example: in a cooking class, you could ask, "Can you walk me through this recipe?" I need a bit of help. This is a casual and friendly way to ask for assistance. Example: at a store, you might say, "I need a bit of help finding this item." Another example: at home, you could say, "I need a bit of help with this puzzle." Can you clarify this? This phrase is used when you need something explained more clearly. Example, in a meeting, you might say, "Can you clarify this point?" Another example, at school, you could ask, "Can you clarify this instruction? Can you help me out?" This is a casual way to ask for help, often used with friends or family. Example, you might say, "Can you help me out with this heavy box?" Another example, at school, you could ask, "Can you help me out with this project?" I'm lost. Can you help? This phrase is used when you're confused or don't know where to go. Example, in a new city, you might say, "I'm lost. Can you help me find the station?" Another example, at work, you could say, "I'm lost. Can you help with this task?" Can you give me some advice? This phrase asks for guidance or suggestions. Example, at work, you might say, "Can you give me some advice on this project?" Another example, with a friend, you could ask, "Can you give me some advice about traveling? Can you take a look at this?" This phrase asks someone to review or check something. Example, at work, you might say, "Can you take a look at this document?" Another example, at home, you could ask, "Can you take a look at this recipe? I need guidance on this." This is a formal way to ask for help or direction. Example, at school, you might say, "I need guidance on this research paper." Another example, at work, you could say, "I need guidance on this client issue. Can you help me figure this out?" This phrase asks for help in solving a problem. Example, at a store, you might say, "Can you help me figure out which phone to buy?" Another example, at school, you could ask, "Can you help me figure out this equation?" I'm struggling with this. This phrase admits difficulty and asks for help indirectly. Example, at work, you might say, "I'm struggling with this task." Another example, at home, you could say, "I'm struggling with this repair. Can you give me a tip?" This phrase asks for a suggestion or advice to improve something. Example, in a cooking class, you might say, "Can you give me a tip for this dish?" Another example, at work, you could ask, "Can you give me a tip for this presentation? Can you help me with this task?" This is a direct and polite way to ask for help with a specific job. Example, at work, you might say, "Can you help me with this data analysis?" Another example, at home, you could ask, "Can you help me with this cleaning task?" I need someone to help me. This phrase is a general call for assistance when you're overwhelmed. Example, at a busy event, you might say, "I need someone to help me with these tasks." Another example, at home, you could say, "I need someone to help me with this project." Can you spare a moment? This is a polite way to ask for someone's time to help you. Example, at work, you might say, "Can you spare a moment to review this?" Another example, at home, you could ask, "Can you spare a moment to help with this?" Can you help me get started? This phrase is used when you need help beginning a task. Example, at a new job, you might say, "Can you help me get started with this software?" Another example, in a hobby class, you could ask, "Can you help me get started with this project?" I need a quick hand. This is a casual way to ask for brief help. Example, at home, you might say, "I need a quick hand with this shelf." Another example, at an event, you could say, "I need a quick hand with these chairs." Can you guide me? This is a polite way to ask for direction or help with a process. Example, at a museum, you might say, "Can you guide me to the exhibit?" Another example, at work, you could ask, "Can you guide me through this task?" I'm not sure how to proceed. This phrase expresses uncertainty and asks for help moving forward. Example, at work, you might say, "I'm not sure how to proceed with this task." Another example, at school, you could say, "I'm not sure how to proceed with this experiment." Can you help me solve this? This phrase asks for help in resolving a problem. Example, at school, you might say, "Can you help me solve this math problem?" Another example, at work, you could ask, "Can you help me solve this issue?" I could use a hand with this. This is a casual way to ask for help with a task. Example, at home, you might say, "I could use a hand with this painting." Another example, at work, you could say, "I could use a hand with this report." Can you show me the way? This phrase is often used when asking for directions or guidance. Example, in a city, you might say, "Can you show me the way to the park?" Another example, at work, you could ask, "Can you show me the way to do this task?" I need a second opinion. This phrase is used when you want someone to review or confirm something. Example, At a store, you might say, I need a second opinion on this outfit. Another example, at work, you could say, I need a second opinion on this design. Can you help me understand? This phrase is used when you need help grasping a concept or idea. Example, in class, you might say, can you help me understand this topic? Another example, at work, you could ask, can you help me understand this policy? Can you check this for me? This phrase asks someone to review something for errors or accuracy. Example, at work, you might say, can you check this email for me? Another example, at school, you could ask, can you check this homework for me? I need help figuring this out. This phrase is used when you're puzzled and need assistance solving something. Example, at home, you might say, I need help figuring out this puzzle. Another example, at work, you could say, I need help figuring out this schedule. Can you give me a boost? This is a casual way to ask for a little help, often for a quick task. Example, at home, you might say, can you give me a boost with this shelf? Another example, at an event, you could say, can you give me a boost with these decorations? I'm in a bit of a bind. This phrase indicates you're in a difficult situation and need help. Example, at work, you might say, I'm in a bit of a bind with this deadline. Another example, at home, you could say, I'm in a bit of a bind with this repair. Can you help me find something? This phrase is used when you need help locating an item or information. Example, at a store, you might say, can you help me find this product? Another example, at home, you could ask, can you help me find my keys? I need a hand with this. This is a casual way to ask for help with a task. Example, at home, you might say, I need a hand with this furniture. Another example, at work, you could say, I need a hand with this project. Can you give me a pointer? This phrase asks for a tip or suggestion to improve something. Example, at work, you might say, can you give me a pointer on this presentation? Another example, in a hobby class, you could ask, can you give me a pointer on this painting? Can you help me with the next step? This phrase is used when you need guidance on what to do next. Example, at work, you might say, can you help me with the next step in this project? Another example, in a class, you could ask, can you help me with the next step in this experiment? I'm having a hard time with this. This phrase expresses difficulty and asks for help indirectly. Example, at school, you might say, I'm having a hard time with this subject. Another example, at home, you could say, I'm having a hard time with this recipe. Can you assist me with this issue? This is a formal way to ask for help with a problem. Example, at a bank, you might say, can you assist me with this account issue? Another example, at work, you could say, can you assist me with this technical issue? That's all for today's lesson on Easy English Hub. We hope these 50 phrases help you feel more confident asking for help in English. Practice them, and you'll be ready for any situation. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time for more English tips.